Drive. Phil's studio is shrouded in a heavy silence, the kind of silence that precedes a storm. The audience watches intently as three people take the stage: a woman with red, swollen eyes, a tense young man holding a brown envelope, and a middle-aged man who can't stop fidgeting with his hands. The atmosphere is thick, heavy with anticipation and fear. This isn't just another episode about family conflict. This is a story about betrayal, identity, and a lie so profound it destroyed the foundations of an entire family. Catherine Mitchell sits upright, her fingers clutching the completely crumpled tissue. Beside her, Daniel, her son, holds the envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. And on the other side of the stage, separated by a physical distance that reflects the emotional distance that has settled in, is Robert Mitchell, or at least the man she has known by that name, during 25 years of marriage. But the truth, that devastating truth that brought this family to Dr. Phil's studio, is about to come out. And when it does, nothing will ever be the same again. Because Robert Mitchell died in a car accident in 1998. So, who is the man sitting on this stage? Who slept beside Catherine all those nights? Who raised Daniel as a father? Who stole an identity and built an entire life on someone else's corpse? Dr. Phil enters the stage with that unmistakable presence, that gaze that penetrates straight to people's souls. He's seen a lot in his more than 20 years on the show. Addictions, betrayals, crimes, family secrets that destroy generations. But even he seems to sense that this story is different. There's something about this case that transcends the common drama of a talk show. There's something here that touches on fundamental questions about identity, truth, and the human capacity to live a lie so complete that it becomes indistinguishable from reality. Before we continue with this impactful story, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of Dr. Phil's upcoming revelations. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what you think will happen in this case. Your opinion is very important for us to continue bringing you this exclusive content that transforms lives. Drive. Phil positions himself center stage, his gaze shifting from one family member to another. He has already read the preliminary documents. He has already spoken with the production team. But even with all his experience, there's an intensity in this case that compels him to proceed with unusual caution. He turns first to Catherine, and his voice, though firm, carries a note of genuine compassion. Catherine, you've been married to Robert for 25 years. You built a life together, raised a son, shared happy and difficult times. But 3 weeks ago, your world completely crumbled. Tell me, in your own words, what happened? Catherine takes a deep breath, and when she begins to speak, her voice trembles with a mixture of anger, pain, and utter disbelief. Phil, I don't even know where to begin. I thought I knew my husband. I thought I knew everything about him. But 3 weeks ago, Daniel was cleaning the attic and found a box, an old lock box hidden behind insulation and wood. When he forced the lock, her voice falters as she looks at her son with an expression of pure agony. Daniel takes over the narrative, his voice firmer, but laden with a cold, controlled rage. When I opened that box, Dr. Phil, I found things that didn't make sense. There was a death certificate, my father's, Robert Mitchell's, dated August 15, 1998, 3 years before I was born, 3 years before my parents got married, according to what I'd always been told. There was also an old driver's license with his picture on it, but with a different name, Marcus Jennings. There were old bus tickets, newspaper clippings about a fatal accident, and letters. Letters from a woman named Linda Jennings, begging Marcus to come home. Dr. Phil slowly turns to the man who calls himself Robert Mitchell. He is pale, sweating, staring at the floor as if he could disappear through it. The audience is absolutely silent, processing the magnitude of what they have just heard. Robert, or should I call you Marcus? You've heard these accusations. Before we get into the evidence, before we look at these documents, I want you to look at your wife and son and tell me, are you Robert Mitchell? The man slowly raises his head, and there are tears in his eyes. But they are not tears of innocence, they are the tears of someone who knows the game is over. His voice comes out hoarse, broken. I'm the man they knew. I'm her husband. I'm his father. That's what matters, isn't it? No. Catherine's voice explodes in the studio, echoing off the walls. That's not what matters. What matters is the truth. Who are you? What is your real name? Why did you do this? Doctor. Phil raises his hand, asking for calm. We'll get there. Catherine? But first, we need to establish the facts. Robert, yes or no, are you the person who was born Robert David Mitchell? A long silence. The studio seems to hold its breath collectively. And then, almost imperceptibly, the man shakes his head negatively. No, I am not. Doctor. Phil shows no surprise. He rarely does, but there's an intensification in his gaze. He moves closer, his presence filling the space, creating undeniable psychological pressure. So who are you? And don't give me half-truths. I have all the documents here. I have investigators who have spent the last 2 weeks tracking your story. So, for the last time, I'll ask politely, what is your real name? The man swallows hard, wipes away his tears with the back of his hand, and finally, after 25 years of living a lie, the truth begins to emerge. My name is Marcus Lee Jennings. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1972. I had a hard life. Drug addiction, debt, involvement with the wrong people. In 1998, I was on the run. There were people after me. Dangerous people. I owed money, a lot of money, to drug dealers. They threatened to kill my family, my mother, my brothers. I had to disappear. Doctor. Phil crosses his arms. And how exactly did you disappear? I was in a small town in New Mexico, trying to figure out what to do, when I read in the local newspaper about a car accident. A man my age had died. Robert Mitchell. He was traveling alone, with no family in the area. The body was. It was badly damaged in the accident. Burned. I saw an opportunity. The audience gasps in shock and horror. Catherine puts her hand to her mouth, as if to vomit. Daniel is rigid, his fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles have turned white. You stole the identity of a dead man. Doctor. Phil's voice is icy, without explicit judgment, but laden with moral weight. I had no choice. They were going to kill me. They were going to kill my family. I went to the scene of the accident before the authorities had fully processed everything, retrieved his wallet, his documents. Then, I requested duplicates, settled in another state. I became Robert Mitchell. I started a new life, a clean life. Doctor. Phil turns to Catherine. When did you two meet? Catherine is trembling, but she answers. 2 years later, in the year 2000, I was working as a nurse in Denver. He, Robert, Marcus, whoever he is, was working in construction. He was kind, caring, seemed like an honest man trying to build a life. We got married 6 months later. Daniel was born the following year. And at no point during the next 25 years, Marcus, did you think your wife and son deserved to know the truth? Marcus shakes his head frantically. I wanted to tell him. 1,000 times I almost did. But how? How do you tell the people you love that your whole life is a lie? That you're not even who you say you are? With each passing year, it became more impossible. I buried Marcus Jennings so deeply that I myself began to believe I was Robert Mitchell. Doctor. Phil isn't buying it. That's not an excuse. That's a choice you've made every day for 25 years. A choice to keep lying, to keep stealing the dead man's identity, to deny your wife and son the basic truth about who you are. Daniel suddenly stood up, his voice exploding. You know, what's sickest about all this? He taught me about honesty. When I was a kid and broke something, he'd say, always tell the truth, Daniel. A man without honesty is nothing. And all the while, the entire time, he was living the biggest lie possible. My name is Mitchell because of a dead man. My entire identity is based on a fraud. Marcus tries to approach his son, but Daniel recoils violently. Don't touch me. You're not my father. I don't even know who you are, Doctor. Phil intervenes, his voice cutting through the emotional chaos. Daniel, sit down. Marcus, you too. There's more to this story, isn't there? Because I have an investigation report here that reveals something you haven't told them yet. Marcus pales even more, if that's possible. I told him everything. No, you didn't tell him. Doctor. Phil opens a folder that was on the table. You told him about assuming Robert Mitchell's identity. You told him about running from drug dealers. But you didn't tell him about Linda Jennings. The name falls on the studio like a bomb. Marcus closes his eyes, as if he could block out reality simply by refusing to see it. Who is Linda Jennings? Catherine asks, her voice dangerously calm. Doctor. Phil is responsible for Marcus. Linda Jennings is Marcus's legal wife. They married in 1995. She is still alive and still lives in Tulsa. And during the last 25 years that Marcus lived as Robert Mitchell, during the 25 years he was married to you, Catherine, he never divorced Linda. You are not legally married to this man. Your marriage is a fraud. Daniel is not legally your son. The studio explodes. The audience is screaming. Catherine is hyperventilating. Daniel is standing again, pointing at Marcus with murderous rage. You have another wife? Catherine is screaming, tears streaming down her face. You made me the other woman without me even knowing? Marcus is shaking his head, trying to speak, but the words won't come out coherently. No, it's not like that. I left her. We weren't together. I just never made the divorce official. Daniel opens the brown envelope he'd been holding the whole time. Do you want to know what else I found in that box? He pulls out documents and photos, throwing them toward Marcus. Letters. Letters Linda Jennings sent you in the first few years after you disappeared. She was pregnant. Marcus, you have another son. A son you abandoned. This revelation is the last straw. Catherine breaks down in uncontrollable sobs. Daniel is trembling with rage. And Marcus finally collapses, falling to his knees on stage, sobbing, I know what I did. I ruined everything. I ruined everyone's lives. But I love you all. I love this family. That has to count for something, Doctor. Phil is standing there, observing the chaos, and then he sees something. Daniel is holding another document. What is this, Daniel? Daniel stares at the paper in his hands with a strange expression, a mixture of anger and something deeper. It's a birth certificate for Jeremy Jennings, born in March 1999, son of Marcus Lee Jennings and Linda Marie Jennings. My half-brother. He walks over to Marcus and tosses the document into his lap. There's an address written on the back. Linda still lives there. In Tulsa. The same address from 25 years ago. She never moved. She raised her son alone, hoping you would come back. Marcus picks up the document with trembling hands, and when he turns it over and sees the address written on the back, something changes in his expression. There's recognition there, and horror, and remorse so deep it feels physical. I have one more thing here. Drive.Phil. Daniel pulls one last photo from the envelope. This photo was with the letters. It's Jeremy Jennings today. He's 26 years old, and Daniel shows the photo to Drive.Phil. The camera captures the image, a young man, clearly resembling Marcus, but with something else in the picture. He is in a wheelchair. Doctor. Phil looks at the photo, then at Marcus, and his expression changes. There's something in the photo he sees, something that wasn't in the reports. He approaches Marcus, who is still looking at the birth certificate, and speaks softly. Marcus, how long have you known about this photo? Marcus doesn't answer. He's frozen, staring blankly at that birth certificate. Marcus, answer this. How long have you known that your son became paraplegic? The studio falls completely silent. Even Catherine's sobs stop. Everyone is looking at Marcus, waiting for an answer. And then Marcus speaks, so softly it's almost a whisper. From the very beginning, from the moment he was born. Doctor. Phil recoils, and for the first time in the entire episode, seems genuinely shocked. Are you telling me you knew you had a child with special needs, and yet you abandoned him? And his mother? I couldn't go back. The drug dealers. Stop the recording. Doctor. Phil's voice cuts like a blade. Stop the recording now. The cameras take a few seconds to actually switch off, capturing the expressions of utter shock on everyone's faces in the studio. Drive.Phil is pointing to the production booth, gesturing emphatically. The audience is in complete turmoil. Catherine is staring at Marcus as if she's seeing a monster. Daniel is standing there, holding that photo, tears silently streaming down his face. And Marcus is there, on his knees on Dr. Phil's stage, the truth finally, after 25 years, completely exposed. Production truly stops. The main lights dim. The audience is ushered out of the studio by crew members, many of them still in shock from what they have just witnessed. This was not a moment for an audience. This was a moment that demanded privacy, humanity, and an intervention that went beyond television entertainment. Dr. Phil finally sits down, not in his usual position of authority, but in a chair next to Marcus, who is still on the floor. Catherine and Daniel are on the other side, keeping their distance, but unable to leave. They need to hear the rest. They need to understand. Dr. Phil's voice, when he speaks, is different. It still has authority, but there's something softer there. Something that acknowledges they're dealing not just with lies and fraud, but with human tragedy. Marcus, I need you to understand the gravity of what you did, not just to Catherine and Daniel, but to Linda and Jeremy. So, I'm going to give you one single chance to be completely honest. No lies, no omissions, no half-truths. Tell me the whole story. Marcus takes a deep breath, wipes his face, and begins. At this time, it's the complete truth, raw and horrible. Linda was pregnant when I started having problems with drugs and dealers. We had just gotten married. I had a good job. Everything was going well. But I started using. I started owing money. When she found out she was pregnant, I promised I would stop, that I would fix everything. But I couldn't. The debts just kept growing. And then I found out that the baby, that Jeremy had problems, spinal problems. The doctor said he would be born with spina bifida, that he would probably never walk. And I panicked. He pauses, breathing heavily, as if the words hurt as they came out. I was a coward. I couldn't handle it. A child with special needs, mounting debts, drug dealers threatening me. So when they finally said they were going to kill my family if I didn't pay, I saw it as an excuse, a way to get away from it all. I took all the money we had, left Linda with practically nothing, and disappeared. I abandoned her pregnant with a baby who would need special care for the rest of his life. Catherine lets out a sound of pure disgust. You're a monster, a cowardly monster. I know. Marcus is openly crying now. I know what I am. And the worst part is that after I became Robert Mitchell, after I met you, Catherine, and we had Daniel, I started to have the life I had thrown away. The family I could have had with Linda and Jeremy. And every day that passed, every happy moment I had with you was stained by the memory of the son I abandoned. The son I never knew, who grew up without a father, who needed me more than anyone else, and I simply disappeared. Doctor. Phil leans forward. And you never tried to get in touch? Never sent money? Never tried to help? How? I was using a fake ID. If I made contact, I could be traced. The traffickers. Stop using the drug dealers as an excuse. Daniel shouts, his voice echoing in the empty studio. How many years have passed? 10, 15, 20. At some point, those drug dealers stopped caring. At some point, you chose not to go back. You chose to keep lying, to keep living as Robert Mitchell, because it was easier than facing what you had done. The silence that follows is deafening, because Daniel is absolutely right, and everyone in the studio knows it, including Marcus. Doctor. Phil pulls another document from his briefcase. I have here a credit report and criminal investigation. Marcus, do you want to know what's interesting? Those drug dealers you owed money to? The leader was arrested in 2003. The whole operation was dismantled. You could have gone back 20 years. You could have admitted who you were, faced the legal consequences of identity fraud, and still saved your relationship with Linda and met your son. But you didn't. Do you know why? Marcus doesn't answer, but everyone knows the answer. Because you were a coward? Because it was easier to continue the lie than to face the truth. You weren't protecting anyone, Marcus. You were protecting yourself. Doctor. Phil stands up and addresses Catherine and Daniel. You need to know something. Linda Jennings is here, in the next room. She flew in from Tulsa this morning, and she brought Jeremy with her. They want to meet you. Not because they're angry at you, you were victims just as much as they were, but because they also need answers. They also need closure. Are you willing to meet them? Catherine and Daniel exchange glances. It's very, very quick, but slowly, they both nod. Marcus gets up, staggering. I can see them too. Doctor. Phil looks at him with an expression that is pure coldness. No, you've lost that right. And honestly, Marcus, after everything you've done, after all the lives you've destroyed, you're lucky I'm not calling the police to arrest you right now for fraud, bigamy, and child abandonment. The only reason I'm not doing that is because Linda asked me not to. She said you've already caused enough damage and that she doesn't want Jeremy to have to testify in a trial against the father he's never met. Marcus collapses back into his chair, sobbing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Your apology means nothing. Apologies are just words. What matters is action, and your actions, for 25 years, have shown exactly who you are. Dr. Phil turns to the production crew. Prepare the meeting room. Catherine, Daniel, you have a few minutes to get ready. I'll bring Linda and Jeremy as the team moves to prepare. Doctor. Phil stops at the door and looks back at Marcus, sitting alone on the dark stage, the pathetic figure of a man who destroyed not one, but the families with his lies. Marcus, when we go back on air, you won't be on the stage anymore. I want you to leave this studio, and I never want to see you again. Do you understand? Marcus simply nods, unable to speak. The cameras return, but the stage is different. Marcus is gone. In his place, there are the families, one that lived a lie unknowingly, and another that was abandoned and forgotten. Linda Jennings is a woman in her 50s with kind but tired eyes. Jeremy is in his wheelchair, a handsome young man with his father's face, but with a strength in his eyes that Marcus never possessed. The encounter is intense, emotional, but also surprisingly healing. Catherine and Linda embrace, to women deceived by the same man, but who hold no resentment toward each other. Daniel and Jeremy converse, to half-brothers who never knew of each other's existence, finding an unexpected connection in their shared trauma. Phil observes, allowing the moment to unfold naturally, and then, when the time is right, he positions himself in front of the main camera, looking directly at the audience at home. You have just witnessed something that I, in over 20 years of doing this program, have rarely seen. A man who not only lied about who he was, but who built an entire life to entire lives on the foundation of a fraud. And you saw the devastating consequences of those lies. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle. But you also saw something more important. You saw for people Catherine, Daniel, Linda, and Jeremy who refused to let one man's lies destroy their ability to find truth, connection, and eventually healing. Dr. Phil walks slowly, his voice gaining intensity. I stopped this recording early, something I rarely do, because there was a point where the entertainment had to stop and humanity had to begin. When I found out that Marcus had not only abandoned a pregnant wife, but a child with special needs, I knew that continuing with the cameras rolling would be exploitation, not education. He points to Catherine and Linda. These two women were victims of the same fraud, but look at them now. They are not enemies. They are allies. They understand that they were deceived by the same man, and instead of turning against each other, they chose to support each other. Then he points to Daniel and Jeremy. These two young men discovered they are brothers under the most impossible circumstances. They could resent each other. Daniel could resent Jeremy for existing, for being proof of his father's betrayal. Jeremy could resent Daniel for having had a father even if it was based on a lie, when he never had anything. But instead, look at them. They are talking, connecting, finding family where before there was only emptiness. Dr. Phil turns directly to the camera, and his voice carries that tone of moral authority that made him famous. Identity is the most fundamental thing we have. It's who we are at the core of our being. When someone lies about identity, not a small lie, but a complete fraud that lasts for decades, they're not just deceiving other people. They're robbing them of the ability to make informed decisions about their own lives. He takes a deep breath. Catherine couldn't choose whether she wanted to marry Marcus Jennings. She thought she was marrying Robert Mitchell. Daniel couldn't choose to know his real identity, his half-brother, the truth about his father. Linda spent 25 years not knowing if the man who abandoned her was alive or dead. If he thought about her, if he thought about the son he left behind. Phil shakes his head. Marcus Jennings was a coward. He ran away from his responsibilities, from his problems, from his own identity. And in the process, he not only ruined his own life, he devastated for others. 5. If we count the real Robert Mitchell, whose identity was stolen even after death. He pauses, letting the silence build tension. But here's the thing about truth. It always comes out. Always. You can bury it. You can build elaborate layers of lies over it. You can live for years or decades believing it has escaped. But truth is like water. It finds the cracks, it seeps through, and eventually, it floods everything. Phil moves closer to the camera. If you're watching this at home, you're living a lie no matter how big or small. Understand this. Every day that passes, you are choosing the lie over the truth. And every day that passes, you are making the inevitable consequences worse. Because when the truth finally comes out, and it will come out, you won't just destroy your own life. You will destroy the lives of everyone who loves you, everyone who trusts you, everyone who has built their lives around who they think you are. His voice grows softer, but no less intense. Marcus told me he continued the lie because with each passing year, it became harder to tell the truth. And he's right. It gets harder. The stakes get higher. The consequences get worse. But you know what's even harder? What these four people are facing now. Rebuilding their entire lives around a new reality. Processing the trauma of discovering that everything they thought they knew was false. Dr. Phil straightens his shoulders. I expelled Marcus from this studio, not as punishment, though he deserves punishment, but because these four people deserve space to begin healing without the presence of the man who caused all this damage. They deserve to start building something real, something based on truth, without the shadow of his lies hanging over them. He looks back at Catherine, Linda, Daniel, and Jeremy. And you know what's amazing? Look at them. After everything they've been through, after all the lies and betrayal, they're choosing connection. They're choosing honesty. They're choosing to move forward together. Dr. Phil turns to the audience one last time. This is what I want you to take away from this episode. Not the drama, not the shock of the identity fraud, but this: the truth can be painful. It can be devastating, but it's the only foundation on which you can build something real. Lies, no matter how comfortable, no matter how long you keep them, eventually crumble. And when they crumble, they bury everyone around them. He pauses for a final moment, his piercing gaze piercing the camera to reach each person watching. So tell me, if you're living a lie today, is it worth it? Is the inevitable damage you'll cause when the truth emerges worth it? Because it will emerge, and when it does, you will have no control over the consequences. Your only choice is to choose the truth now, willingly, or to wait until the truth chooses you, and when it does, it will be on its terms, not yours. Dr. Phil takes a deep breath, and his final voice is almost a whisper, but it carries through the studio like thunder. Identity matters. Truth matters. And in the end, who you truly are will always be more powerful than who you pretend to be. Always. He looks at the four people on stage one last time, a slight nod of acknowledgement to what they will face in the coming days, months, and years. And then, to the camera, thank you for watching. And remember, the truth can be painful, but it's the only thing that sets you free. The camera keeps Dr. Phil in focus for another moment, then slowly pulls back, capturing Catherine and Linda sitting together, Daniel and Jeremy talking quietly. For people beginning the impossible journey of rebuilding their lives on the foundation of truth. Finally revealed. The lights dim, the episode ends, but the message resonates long after the cameras stop rolling. Some lies are too big to be forgiven, but the truth, no matter how late it arrives, is always the first step toward redemption.